In my family, my money has never been my own. They call it the family fund, a communal pot of gold that I was just lucky enough to earn. Since I sold my software company at 19, every decision has been made by a committee of 3. My mother, my father, and me. Except in our committee, their 2 votes always outweighed my 1. I wasn't a daughter. I was the chief financial officer of their dreams. I'm sitting here now in the sprawling house they advised me to buy for them, listening to their latest brilliant venture. My brother Ryan needs a $100,000 seed investment for a revolutionary new coffee shop. My father, acting as the family's appointed investment guru, is nodding seriously, talking about projected returns. My mother is already planning the lavish grand opening party. They aren't asking me. They are informing me. I'm just supposed to sign the check, the same way I've always signed. They see my signature as a family asset. What they've forgotten, what they've conveniently ignored for years, is the legal document I signed with my lawyer last week. They believe their parental authority is a lifelong contract. They have no idea it's a lease that has just expired. Of course, this coffee shop pitch isn't new. It's just a different verse of the same song they've been singing for 5 years, ever since the money from my buyout hit the bank. The first verse was the house. I was 20, and my dream was a small, sleek condo downtown, a place that was just for me. I showed them the listing, my voice buzzing with excitement. My father looked at it and frowned. He pulled out a binder, he always has a binder, filled with listings for this 5-bedroom suburban palace. "This is a real asset, Chloe," he'd said, "a family legacy." My mother put her hand on my arm. "You want to be all alone in the city? After all the sacrifices we made, driving you to coding camps, shouldn't we have a place to enjoy this success together?" My dream of independence was suddenly an act of filial betrayal. My desire for a front door with only my name on it was painted as selfishness. So I signed the papers. They got their legacy. I got a guest room in it. The next verse was Ryan's. Artisan Dog Biscuit Bakery. I knew it was a bad idea. The business plan was a mess, and his passion lasted exactly as long as the initial excitement. I tried to say no, gently. I suggested he get a small business loan to have some of his own. Skin in the game. That's when my father accused me of hoarding wealth, and my mother started to cry. "This family is a team," she sobbed. "Why won't you support your own brother?" So, I wrote the check. $250,000. The bakery went under in 8 months. There was no apology, no accountability. It was just a good learning experience for Ryan. My money was his tuition. It became the pattern. My accounts were their emergency fund, their vacation planner, their venture capital, firm. They never saw the all-nighters I pulled to build my company. They only saw the result, a well that never ran dry. They saw me not as the architect of my success, but as a lottery winner who had a duty to share the prize. It was after the bakery failed that I finally went to see my own lawyer in secret. I just wanted to understand what my options were. He reviewed the original corporate structure my father had helped me set up when I was a teenager. And he found it. A clause. A simple, beautiful clause that stated upon my 25th birthday, I had the sole authority to dissolve the partnership and restructure all assets in my name alone. My father, in his arrogance, must have thought I'd never read the fine print. That birthday was 6 months ago. The partnership was dissolved last Tuesday. Every account is now in my name, and my name alone. So I'm letting them finish their pitch. I'm listening to the detailed plans for a future they've built in, a country where their passports have just been revoked. My father closed his binder with a self-satisfied snap. The pitch concluded. Ryan was practically vibrating with excitement, already mentally designing his logo. My mother looked at me with that familiar, expectant smile, the one that meant time. "To sign, dear." The air was thick with the weight of their collective assumption. This was the moment, the precipice I'd been standing on for years. "It's a very detailed plan," I said, my voice even. "But the answer is no." 3 faces snapped towards me. The smiles vanished. "Chloe, don't be difficult," my mother began, her tone shifting instantly from cheerful to wounded. My father put on his disappointed but patient dad voice. "We're not asking you, honey. The family fund is a partnership. Ryan and your mother and I all vote yes. It's decided. Actually, I said, leaning forward slightly, it isn't. I let the silence hang for a beat. There seems to be a fundamental misunderstanding. You're operating under the assumption that the family fund partnership still exists. Ryan scoffed. Of course it exists. You think we're idiots? No, I said calmly. I think you just forgot to read the fine print. The fine print of the document Dad had me sign when I was 19. The one that gave me, upon my 25th birthday, the sole authority to dissolve that partnership without a vote. The color drained from my father's face. He knew exactly what I was talking about. That birthday was 6 months ago, I continued, my voice gaining strength. I met with my lawyers last week. The partnership known as the Family Fund has been legally dissolved. All assets have been restructured and moved into a new trust. A trust to which I am the sole trustee and you have no legal access or authority. Your votes no longer count because you are no longer on the board. There is no more committee. They stared at me, speechless. It was as if I'd just told them the law of gravity had been repealed. My father finally stammered, You can't. I would have to approve. I slid a thin file folder across the polished dining room table. You can call my lawyer if you like, I said. His card is on top of the dissolution papers. He can walk you through it. The turning point wasn't a loud, dramatic explosion. It was a quiet, legal, and absolute coup. The well had just run dry. And they were only just beginning to realize they were holding empty buckets. The silence in the room after my announcement was heavy and fragile. It broke when my father, with a choked, incredulous laugh, finally spoke. His attack wasn't emotional. It was an assault on my competence. You have no idea what you're doing, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. I built that portfolio structure to protect you, to minimize your tax burden. You and your slick new lawyer have probably just undone years of careful planning. You're a brilliant coder, Chloe, but you're a child when it comes to money. I was protecting you from yourself. He framed his control as stewardship, my independence as sheer incompetence. He wasn't mourning the loss of a family bond. He was furious that his star employee had just quit. Then came my mother's offensive. She dissolved into perfectly calibrated tears, the kind that had worked on me my entire life. I just can't believe how cold you've become, she whispered, twisting a napkin in her hands. This was never about money, it was about family, about being a unit. You've just excommunicated us. What will we tell our friends? That our daughter, who we sacrificed everything for, has put her money ahead of her own mother and father. She didn't mention the house she was sitting in or the car in the driveway. She bypassed the years of exploitation and went straight for the guilt, painting my act of self-preservation as a cruel, public shaming. Ryan's reaction was the most honest, pure, unfiltered entitlement. So that's it? He sneered, throwing his hands up. You just cut me off? What about my coffee shop? I've been working on that plan for months. You have billions and you can't spare a dime for your own brother? You were always the selfish one. The $250,000 I had already given him for his failed bakery had apparently vanished from his memory. To him, my money wasn't something I had earned. It was something he was owed. In the days that followed, their attacks became a coordinated siege. My father sent me condescending articles about failed startups. Ryan posted vague, passive-aggressive memes about family betrayal. But my mother's tactic was the most brutal, the silent treatment, punctuated by single late-night voicemails that just contained the sound of her crying before she hung up. They were trying to make my new freedom feel like a cold, lonely prison, hoping the silence would be more painful than their control. But with every manipulative text, with every staged sob, they weren't breaking me down. They were proving my point. They were giving me all the evidence I needed that the legal wall I had built wasn't high enough. I needed to build a personal one too. The emotional war of attrition dragged on for another week. I tried to ignore it, to find solace in the quiet of my own small condo downtown, the one place that was truly mine. It was my sanctuary, the fortress I had built against their influence. I was working on a new project, a passion project, a nonprofit foundation to teach coding to girls in low-income neighborhoods. It was the first thing I wanted to build that was purely for someone other than them. My plans, My research, my journals, I kept them locked in my desk drawer. It was the one part of my life they hadn't touched. I found out they had breached the fortress on a Tuesday. I came home from a long day of meetings and felt it immediately. A cold draft in the air, a cushion on the sofa slightly out of place. My heart began to pound. I went to my office. The lock on my desk drawer was scratched. I opened it. My private journal was open, its spine cracked. The proposal for my foundation was sitting on top, a faint coffee cup ring staining the cover page. Someone had been here. Someone had gone through my most private thoughts. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. "Hi, honey. Was in the neighborhood and was so worried when you didn't answer. I used my emergency key just to make sure you were okay. So glad you are. By the way, I happened to see the proposal for your little charity idea. It is so adorable, and you have such a big heart. Your father and I think it's a fantastic first project for you to fund. Ryan would be the perfect public face for it. Let's all have dinner tomorrow at the house to discuss the new family venture." I read the text twice. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it. The invasion of my home. The violation of my privacy. The theft of my one selfless dream, which they had already repackaged as a family venture with my leech of a brother as its face. They hadn't just crossed a line, they had proven that in their minds, no line between us could ever exist. To them, I had no private thoughts, no independent dreams, no sanctuary they could not breach and colonize for their own purposes. The last ounce of familial obligation in my veins turned to ash. I did not text her back. Instead, I picked up the phone. I called my father, I called my mother, I called my brother. To each of them, I said the exact same thing, in a voice as cold and dead as a dial tone. "Be at the house tomorrow at noon. We have a final meeting." It wasn't a request. It was a summons to their own execution. They arrived at noon, walking into the house I paid for with the confident air of executives arriving to a meeting they were sure to win. My mother was already talking before the door was closed. "Chloe, darling, I'm so glad you came to your senses. We have so many wonderful ideas for the foundation." "Sit down," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it had a new and terrible weight to it that made them all stop and stare. I waited until they were seated on the ridiculously expensive sofa they'd picked out. On the coffee table in front of them was a single plain cardboard box. "This isn't a family meeting," I began, my voice as cold and clear as glass. "This is a severance. We're not discussing a new venture. We're dissolving an old one." I looked at my father. "You taught me that every investment needs to be reviewed. So, I reviewed my portfolio. And I found my single worst investment was this family. Dad, you weren't my protector. You were a manager who embezzled from his only client." I turned to my mother. "You spoke of family and love, but what you meant was access and control. You used guilt like a currency to buy your lifestyle. Yesterday, you broke into my home and tried to colonize my soul. You weren't a mother, you were a thief." Finally, I looked at my brother. "Ryan, you were a black hole of entitlement I was, expected to pour my life into. You weren't a brother, you were simply a debt I am no longer willing to pay." I pushed the cardboard box toward them. "In this box, you will find the keys to this house, the key to my condo that you stole, and your credit cards which have all been canceled. Your access to me and to my life is over." I then picked up a folder from the end table. "This is a listing agreement. This house goes on the market Monday. A moving company will be here in 30 days to take your personal belongings to a storage unit. I've paid for the first 3 months. After that, you are on your own." The explosion of sputtering rage and disbelief began, but I stood up, their noise already fading into the background. "We are done," I said. "This is the last time we will speak. Any further communication will be handled by my lawyers. Goodbye." I didn't look back as I walked out the front door. I left them there, sitting in the ruins of the kingdom they had built with my money, finally silenced by the one word they never thought I'd learn to say: no. The borders were up. The manipulation was over. And for the first time, I was truly, completely, gloriously free. It's been a year. The sprawling house I never wanted was sold in a week. The proceeds, along with everything else, now sit in a professionally managed trust that funds one thing: my foundation. We launched Code Forward 6 months ago, and last week I watched our first class of 30 teenage girls graduate from their introductory programming course. Seeing their faces, alight with the pride of creating something that was truly theirs, gave me a sense of return on investment my father's spreadsheets could never capture. I have no contact with my family. The restraining orders ensured that. I heard through a distant aunt that they had to sell their cars and move into a small rental 2 towns over. My father is trying to rebuild a client list. My brother works in retail. Their power, their influence, their entire lifestyle. It was all a house of cards built on my signature, and once I withdrew it, it all collapsed. I live in my condo now. It's quiet. It's mine. I realized the greatest luxury my money bought me wasn't things. It was silence. The silence of a phone that doesn't ring with a new demand. The silence of a Sunday morning free from guilt. The silence of my own thoughts, finally uninterrupted. They thought my success was about money, but it was always about autonomy. I just had to fight my own family to finally claim it. For anyone out there whose success has been treated like a public resource, remember that your hard work belongs to you. Setting a boundary isn't an act of cruelty. It's an act of self-worth. If you've had to fight for your own financial independence, I'd be honored to hear your story in the comments. Let's empower each other to own our futures. Thank you for listening. And please subscribe for more stories about taking back the keys to your own life.